Welcome to NFL Nexus. They always say actions speak louder than words. But in the NFL, sometimes the very first words from a new coach can be an earthquake. They can send shockwaves through an entire organization and completely rewrite the script for a season. And today, we're breaking down how just a handful of sentences have done exactly that in Cleveland. Okay, so let's just dive right in. The scene is the annual NFL meetings down in Arizona. Now, usually, this is a time for coaches and GMs to talk a lot without really saying anything, right? They keep their cards super close to the vest. But the new Browns head coach, Todd Monken, his first public comments did the complete opposite. He's creating some serious ripples and raising massive questions about two of the most critical groups on the entire team. This really is the start of a brand new era in Cleveland, and what's become immediately clear is that Coach Monken is not just inheriting the old way of doing things. No, he's making it plain as day that his evaluation of this roster, from the top all the way to the bottom, is just getting started. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of what he said, if you enjoy these deep dives into team strategy, do us a favor and subscribe to NFL Nexus so you never miss out on our analysis. So, the very first ripple from Monken's press conference, where does it hit? Well, of course, it hits the most important position on the entire field and maybe the most scrutinized player on the whole roster, the quarterback. Everybody, and I mean everybody, thought they knew what the plan was here. But Monken just came in and poured a whole bucket of ice-cold water on that idea. Monken was asked directly about the quarterback situation, and he said it's going to be a fair competition. Now, that's a phrase we hear all the time in the NFL, right? It can mean a lot of things. But it was his next sentence that really made everyone's ears perk up. He clarified that while it's fair, the reps are not going to be split evenly. They're going to go to the player who gives them the best chance to win, period. It's a pure meritocracy right from day one. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. Because the contrast between these two guys is just stark. On one side, you've got Deshaun Watson, the guy with the massive, fully guaranteed contract. But he ended last season on the PUP list. That's the physically unable to perform list. And it's been a while since we've seen him play at that elite 2019 level. Then, on the other side, you've got Shedeur Sanders, a fifth-round rookie. He took his lumps, for sure, but he showed some incredible toughness. And the key thing is, he ended the season on the field, leading the team to key wins. Monken even went out of his way to praise him for always being in his office, trying to learn. And this quote right here, this is the one that changes everything. This phrase is absolutely crucial. When a coach says decisions will be based on where the year ended last year, it heavily, and I mean heavily, implies that the guy who was actually playing, the guy who was actually winning games at the end of the year, has the inside track. Sanders was on the field, Watson was on the sideline. If Monken is a what have you done for me lately kind of guy, then Sanders might just have a huge leg up in this whole thing. This also creates a really fascinating dynamic in the front office. Think about it. The owner, Jimmy Haslam, and the GM, Andrew Berry, they've publicly said that Watson had a great opportunity to be the starter. But Monken? He wasn't in the building for any of that. He wasn't there for the trade, for the contract, for any of the promises made. He's a new voice with a totally fresh set of eyes, and it really looks like he's basing his decisions purely on what he can see right now and what just happened on the field. That's a huge philosophical shift for this organization. All right, before we move on to the next big ripple Monken created, just want to take a quick second to ask for your support. We pour a ton of time and research into these explainers, and if you're enjoying them, a great way to help the channel is by grabbing one of our NFL Nexus coloring books. Seriously, they're perfect for kids, grandkids, or even for you if you're looking for a way to unwind. You can find the link right in the description or just scan the QR code on your screen now. We really appreciate all the support. Okay, let's get back to it. So let's move on to the next ripple, because this thing just keeps building. Monken's comments didn't stop with the quarterbacks. Oh no. In fact, what he said next threw the entire seemingly rock-solid plan for the offensive line into complete and utter chaos. Heading into this offseason, if you asked any analyst, any beat writer, any fan who pays attention what the Browns' interior offensive line was going to look like, you would have gotten the exact same answer from pretty much everyone. The plan seemed obvious. It was logical. It looked like it was set in stone based on their moves in free agency. It just seems so simple, right? You bring in the big-name free agent Zion Johnson to fill that left guard spot. Then you take your other big-money free agent, the super versatile Elkin Jenkins, and you slide him right into the center position. And then you re-sign Tevin Jenkins to lock down that right guard spot where he finished the season playing really well. It was just a neat, tidy, and frankly, a very powerful-looking interior line. And then this happens.
This quote right here perfectly shows how one single preference from a new head coach can just detonate a perfectly good plan. With just 8 words, Monken took that clean, tidy picture and just shattered it into a million pieces. Now, he didn't say Jenkins will play guard, but come on, when the new head coach expresses a preference that strong, you gotta take it seriously.
So just look at the mess this creates if Monken gets his wish. Zion Johnson is still at left guard. Okay, that part seems safe. But now you've got this massive, glaring question mark right in the middle of your offensive line at center. And all of a sudden, over at right guard, you've got 2 guys for one spot. Elgin Jenkins, the guy the coach wants there, and Tevin Jenkins, the guy you just paid to play that exact position. What was a clear plan is now a puzzle with a piece missing and an extra one you don't know what to do with. See, this isn't just about moving one player. This one little comment about where one guy might play, it sets off a huge domino effect. It creates this whole cascade of new problems and strategic headaches for the Browns front office to figure out before training camp even starts. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. You've got this potential disconnect between the front office and the new coaching staff. You've got general manager Andrew Berry on record saying he was confident in the O-line they'd put together, that they could play today. But the new head coach's preference directly contradicts that confidence, right? It creates a massive starting caliber hole right smack in the middle of the line. This one move just unleashes a flood of questions. First and foremost, who plays center? I mean, are they really going to hand the keys to a veteran backup coming off a devastating knee injury? That's a huge gamble. And second, what do you do with Tevin Jenkins? You just re-signed him to be a starter. Is he now one of the most expensive backups in the league? And finally, how does this completely blow up their entire draft board? A position they thought was totally locked down is now a glaring need. It changes everything. Now, the Browns do have a few paths they could take, but none of them are as clean as the original plan. They could roll the dice on their in-house guy, Luke Weipler, and just hope for the best. They could open up the checkbook again and go sign a veteran like Graham Glasgow. They could try and find a bargain with cheaper free agents like James Daniels or Andre James. Or they could totally pivot their draft strategy and target a center like Iowa's Logan Jones in the mid-rounds. Or maybe, just maybe, Monken reconsiders and they go back to the original plan. So after all these ripples, after all these dominoes have been tipped over, after all these new questions, what's the big picture for the Cleveland Browns as they get ready for the 2026 season? What does all this disruption really mean at the end of the day? The most important thing to take away from all this is that any past assumptions you had about this team, you can pretty much throw them out the window. Todd Monken is setting his own standard for evaluation. It's not based on contracts, it's not based on where you were drafted, it's based on recent performance and his own preferences. He is actively reshaping this team's identity before they've even put on pads. And this slide right here just sums up the whole shift perfectly. The old certainty was that Deshaun Watson was QB1, no questions asked, because of that huge contract. The new reality? It's a wide-open competition that seems to favor the guy who was winning games at the end of last year. The old certainty was a set-in-stone offensive line. The new reality is a massive hole at center and a traffic jam at guard. What looked like a stable, clear plan just a few weeks ago is now a landscape of total uncertainty and intense competition at 2 of the most critical spots on offense. So this leaves us with one final big picture thought to chew on. By shaking everything up this dramatically at quarterback and on the offensive line, is Todd Monken establishing a new, higher standard of competition, a true meritocracy that's going to make the Browns a better football team? Or is he accidentally kicking off a chaotic offseason, creating internal conflict that could derail things before they even get started? We would love to know what you think, so drop your opinion down in the comments below. Thanks for diving deep with us today here on NFL Nexus. If this breakdown gave you a new way to look at the Browns offseason, do us a huge favor and hit that like button. And of course, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our next piece of analysis. We appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time.